Okay, it's 8:35. Let me quickly start the meeting. I will let you know once we're live.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we can start now.
I guess I need to clarify. Do you want me to bring the meeting to order before you read the?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you for joining us.
And should I conduct?
Yes.
Okay. And let me quickly conduct the roll call. Chair Willis,
Present.
Vice Chair Pease,
Present.
thank you. Board Member Bauer,
Present.
Board Member Eggleston Sislowich is absent, but she'll join us later. Board Member Henrik,
Present.
Board Member McKinnon.
Okay.
I see that he's on Zoom, Board Member McKinnon. If you could unmute yourself and say that you're present.
We see him.
We see him on Zoom. Board Member Weimer,
Present.
we have a quorum. Thank you.
I'm going to read a little spiel here. During the meeting, members of the public may provide live public comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of public comment on that item. Speakers may address items that are not on the agenda during the oral communications portion of the meeting. If a public comment speaker which wishes to speak on more than one item, please indicate on the speaker card. Spoken comments via a computer will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the board, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 968-0019-7512. And that concludes the spiel.
Oh, thank you, Amy. So our next item is adopting resolution to continue this meeting.
Your microphone.
Sorry. Our next item is adopting a resolution to continue with Zoom meetings temporarily. Do we have a motion to approve or a motion to?
I move to approve the resolution.
And a second.
I second it.
Thank you. And all in favor, we can do this with a voice vote?
Yeah, let me conduct the vote. Chair Willis,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pease,
Aye.
Board Member Bauer,
Yes.
Board Member Henrik,
Yes.
Board Member McKinnon, maybe I can help him in the meantime with the microphone. Board Member Weimer,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak to us this morning?
I haven't received any speaker cards. Let me quickly check if there are any people on Zoom that would like to speak. So far, I don't see any raised hands.
Thank you. And next up is agenda changes, additions, and deletions. I don't have any suggestions. Does anybody else have anything? And seeing nothing. And we've been joined by Alicia. So, oh, sorry, Alyssa. So moving on, do we want to talk about our schedule of meetings coming up? Does anybody have any absences that aren't noted on the, we just heard one. So Christian, September 9th, is that your absence? September 8th, sorry. So can we add Christian to September 8th is not attending? Anybody else? Nothing. Okay, great. Amy, do we have a little update on our inventory update?
We have the progress is not the progress that we would wish it to be. It's progress with the contract situation. There's certain things that have to happen when contracts are more than a certain amount in the city. So that's what's been happening. And we're getting to the final stages of that. So I'm hoping that we can launch, maybe next week. So just to be clear that, is everyone seeing this? I have a toolbar at the top that blocks the, we have a couple of consultants that we're working with to get this huge project off the ground. And these are the scope tasks. So we have one consultant that we have identified to do a historic resources reconnaissance survey and facilitate the designation of properties to the historic inventory and come to the community meetings and the other outreach, and then attend public hearings. And so we're estimating, multiple HRB hearings and at least one, but probably multiple council meetings. And then we have another consultant who is helping us with other tasks that include preparing notices and having conversations with each and every property owner. So 30 minutes for 130 property owners, and then preparing staff reports. So they'll be working closely with me, both consultants. So that's basically it. I have some other slides again if we get into any discussion, but we're not really prepared to say a lot more than this as far as the inventory update, just because of where we are.
I think the board does have some questions. So maybe they're just informational questions, like things we would like the answer to at some point, or maybe they're answers you can give us. Anybody have things they want to define about this, the consultant's work?
I have a question, Carolyn. Amy, is this going to include mid-century modern review? A review of mid-century modern buildings?
Not at this time. The survey that was authorized by council to launch was with respect to those that were identified that were older than 1948, that were identified in the last survey as National Register eligible. And then those that more recently were identified as California Register eligible. That is the focus of this limited survey.
So you said after 1948?
Sorry, did I say after? I meant constructed before 1948. I haven't had my coffee, sorry.
So I'm sorry to hear that. So I don't understand why we're not, well, I'm sorry the scope isn't larger. It seems to me to be missing an opportunity here to actually get a huge number of buildings that are potentially have the potential to be registered, not reviewed. So I'm puzzled.
I understand. And I think, again, the focus is, the at-risk earlier than constructed before 1948 homes. There are other structures besides homes, but I think the risk is, ministerial permits that can just wipe those out quickly if we don't act on those. So yes, there are larger tasks. We have the grant opportunity every year that passes us by to not submit that would be at least a modern era context statement that we could hope to get some funding, some grant funding for. We could consider submitting next year during the grant cycle.
Great, thank you.
I think, at least from my point of view, David, that we need to start building. And I think the first step is an easy one because council has already given us direction. So these properties are already identified. All the research has been done. We do need to make sure they're standing, but we did that survey last year. So we are aware of that most of them are. And I think that is the first building block. And I'm excited we're starting to build. I think the second one is to get our existing inventory online. I think that it clarifies, what we have, what we are looking for going forward. I think it would be a little backwards to put the new property, they recently 20 years ago, identified properties on the web with their research, with the information on those properties without having our existing inventory. I think it's a little confusing. So I would like to find a way to collect volunteers, and I think this is a good job for the board. I don't see us typing up inventory sheets, but I'm sure we're all aware of those inventory sheets. They all need retyping. They're just practically illegible in places. So I think I see one of the board's tasks this fall as lining up a system for updating the existing inventory and putting it online. And then we can move on. After we get those two, we'll move on to mid-century. But I think we need to sort of start at the beginning.
Well, Caroline, just as a response, my sadness is that we've had this grant proposal that's ready to go to do a mid-century modern review, which the council doesn't move forward. I actually think the council might move it forward if staff would move it to the council, but it's not going anywhere. And that's partially free money. I mean, grants are grants, and we would have a very good chance. And we've been trying to get this done for more than 3 years that I can remember, maybe longer. That's all. So these houses, mid-century modern houses, are coming up on 70 years old, some of them. That's not a insignificant time period. So I just wanted to bring that to board's attention.
I think it's a good point. And maybe Amy could update us a little bit on staffing potential while we're talking about that, because I think part of our issue is, we have limited bandwidth at this point.
I would say that's the entire issue. We have, as many companies, we have the Great Recession, we have, or whatever, not the Great, what do they call it? Resignation, the Great Resignation. We're not unaffected by that. We have people that leave, and then people have to fill in for the tasks that aren't done by those people. So I had somebody that I was working with that was doing maybe 30% of her time helping me. That was Danielle. And she left. And there's reasons people leave. So that has to be dealt with as well.
Is there some hopeful information in there that we are dealing with it, that we have we have candidates in the process?
There is that. We had interviews this week, so for 2 associate planner positions. But as quick as we make offers, they say, it's too expensive. I can't do this. So this is the problem: is cost of housing, cost of living. We don't offer enough money for people to make that change and come here. So,
is there any way that would be appropriate for the board to speak out in terms of salaries? And
it's probably not appropriate.
We will suffer on.
But there is recognition that we have, staffing shortage. So this is why when we go and we ask for consultant dollars, we find ourselves, successful. Typically, it is a process that takes a while, especially when people aren't in the office. It happens. So, but
I just feel like what David's talking about, with adding mid-century modern properties to our inventory and updating the existing inventory, that I'm baffled as to why it hasn't happened previously. And also this new batch that we're talking about now, which have been identified as National Register eligible, it just seems like it could really benefit from somebody who had significant time to coordinate those 3 efforts. And it does seem like sort of foundation block to our historic preservation program. And using consultants is great, but I think that there's some ownership issues, and I feel like we would really benefit from a staff person who was, had significant time to develop this inventory.
That's the second consultant I put here. These are tasks that are typically done by a staff person, would be done by a staff person. So,
And I guess, oh, am I going to lose my? So when the consultants are on board, is there an opportunity for a subset of us to meet with them almost immediately?
yes,
To
I'm happy to, if you wanted to form a subcommittee of members that would want to have, biweekly meetings or such, I'm happy to set that up.
I just think, especially in the beginning, to talk about, what our concerns are, what we feel is unique to Palo Alto, maybe try and sidestep, some potential potholes in the road. I think it would be really good in the beginning to have sort of close contact with the consultants. So can I ask the board who would be interested in doing that?
Yeah.
It is on. Is that on?
Now it's on.
Okay. I have questions about how the letter is going to be composed and vetted for its content, accuracy, readability, understandability, if it can be tested a little bit before it's sent out to everyone, that sort of thing. So I would be interested in how that process is going to work.
I think following with Christian's thought that we were talking about maybe identifying 10 property owners out of that 130 who had a variety of perspectives and interest in who could help us refine our questions and answers on the internet and our letter and, our general direction. I'll volunteer my husband. But if the board has ideas about who those people could be, if you could just email me, that would be great. Because I think it will help when we have the names associated with these properties, but maybe some of you know some people who already are, who have spoken out in the past.
Sorry, did I miss who is the second person on that subcommittee?
I will be on the subcommittee. Anybody else? Yep. We have Christian. You're
Yeah.
number one. I'm number two. Gogo will be number three. And I think if, as things evolve, we might morph a little here, there, and the other way. So thank you.
And I'll say at some point we will, once the contract is official, we can talk about having our two consultants come and address the entire board.
That sounds great. You're-
Timeline, are we looking at 1 month, 2 months from now, or?
Well, hopefully we will have the contract and then I will have a meeting with them and, get going on something that we could write a report on and then set it for the agenda. There's some other things that are coming forward. There's a potential district that I have made a promise to, be their project planner to bring to the study session of the HRB. So that is something that I'll be focusing on as far as writing a staff report. But if we don't get a staff report written to describe the initial week of work, then you'll understand, and we can just have a kind of a free form discussion and put it on the agenda.
I think that's fine. Actually, we all are very excited to get to that point. So that would be great. Better than fine. So Amy, my last question to you is, when council asked us to go forward with updating the inventory, did they specifically say residential properties?
At the time, the focus was SB9, and they knew that there were other properties on the eligible list. But the focus, the impetus, the money promised was related to the SB9 event, state law. So I think of those as part of this because they're also on the inventory, but they're not as at risk because any non-residential property is subject to discretionary review.
Right.
So they're protected by CEQA. In other words, we would have to study them and take care with them for any discretionary. We have discretion for like architectural review processes.
You and I have talked about this in the past, and I think I probably said it to the board too, but I feel actually pretty strongly that we should take the city properties that are on that list, especially the ones that are not controversial at all or not at risk, and put them on the inventory. I think we need to step up as a city and say, this is something we support. And I'm not really sure how we move forward with that. So I would also like to collect a subcommittee that could talk to Public Works or real estate or whomever is in charge of these buildings that might actually act as an owner representing the city. And I would like to move forward because I think that it might point out some of our issues with the residential ones. I think it would make a clear statement that this is important to the city, and we're not just doing it in reaction to SB9. We're doing it because we want to protect our historic properties. So can I loop anybody into being interested in this particular? I think it's, in my mind, it's basically the water tower and the pumping station. I'm pretty sure there are other properties there. I can't remember. But those are the two that stick out in my mind, reviewing the list. And the research has been done. Hasn't been that much that's happened to either of those properties in the last 20 years. One is in a park setting already. The other one's park adjacent. So I think that the underlying work is pretty much done. I think it's just a matter of, going to the city and seeing if there's any possible way they would object, or, the city departments, not the city, but people within the city who manage those buildings, see if there's any objections on their part. So anybody except me excited about this one? No. Okay. Well, maybe I will try and round up a neighborhood group and see if I can find at least more than just myself. But Amy, could I start this process and go to the relevant parties and start talking about, whether there's any reason not to go forward on this?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly grab the list of properties that are city owned on that eligibles list, and others that are not, the city owned properties, and share that with our real estate department, and let them know that you're interested in having a meeting, and I can set up a meeting. The three of us can meet, and then from that point, maybe some things will become more clear, and we can bring it back to the board and let the board know.
That sounds great. I'm really interested. I just think that we need, multiple things. We need to make positive steps. We need to get the community interested again. I think there's, great potential to bring these things up. And, in my mind, if, in these conversations, maybe we put these on the national register, maybe we go all the way with these, and then we would know when a homeowner asks, okay, you will put me on your city inventory, but how do I get on the national register? And I think it might clarify, how that's operating these days. So I think it would be a really good thing for all of us to be aware of. This just seems like a good entry point to me, although, in some ways it's much more complicated than just a homeowner.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it involves a trip to Washington, D.C. or something for that level of, I don't know what that would be like.
There you go. Okay, so do we have any other questions for Amy regarding the inventory update?
Yeah, I just have one quick clarification question. So are there non-residential properties that are going to be covered in the consultant scope of work? it sounds like it's primarily residential, but are there other things or?
I mean, it's not on the 130 properties that are identified on this slide. That is the focus of this. But, so the thought was we would launch this piece, which was the authorized piece, and then, sometime down the road, we would have this this process, and then because some of these are not city owned, the non-residential properties are, for instance, 321 California. We had this discussion a few months back, and so that's an example where we are not set up quite right yet, unless they come forward and say, we'd like to do this.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Anybody else questions regarding?
Yeah, just really quickly, residential includes multi-unit.
Yes, multifamily residential is residential. These 130, I believe, are the single family that we have that are not as protected. As multifamily has to go through the architectural review process, it's a discretionary process.
There were a couple of things in the list.
Yes. Yes. So, that could be folded in just like these other properties, as we get, I think, past the first set or two or three, a lot of properties. So it will take time.
So let's move on to approval of minutes. The big one, was Mike here or was he not? We have him both as attending and not attending. So, but we don't seem to have him today either. Unless we need to work on his microphone.
I'm here.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thanks. So do you remember our last meeting? Were you in attendance or did you come in late?
I was not at the last meeting, as I recall. I think I had computer problems.
Okay. Just looking for my minutes. So Medina, we can make that one. Okay. Thank you.
And,
So
Chair Willis, I also see one raised hand on Zoom.
Oh,
Yeah,
was that for
Yeah.
the last item?
probably yes,
Oh,
for
shoot.
the site inventory update.
Inventory update.
Yeah.
Okay.
oh, okay. So
Yeah.
do you want to go back to that?
Yes. Can
Oh,
I?
okay.
Okay,
I
okay.
apologize.
Yeah. I see that Darlene Yapley raised her hand. Darlene, let me unmute you.
Good morning. I live on Waverly Street, University South, and I'm a prospective home maybe on the 130 list. I made a public comment at the May 12th HRB meeting also, and I underscored the comments by Chair Willis that encourages the effort to make information for prospective historical property owners understandable and relevant to their expected questions and transparent. So I was pleased to hear today that you are looking at including 10 people on the 130 list to help review and create the content. And I want to say that I'm happy to volunteer for that. And I thank you for all you do.
We love those comments. Thank you very much, Darlene. And we will put you on our first batch of callers for the inventory update.
Chair Willis, that's it. That's only public attendee we have today.
Thank you. So moving back to the minutes, does anybody have corrections other than attendance? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconded.
Oh, wait, we didn't get a first.
Great.
yet.
Let me
sorry.
Oh,
conduct
did we?
the
Did
vote.
Dave? Okay, never mind. Okay. So Board Member Bauer, you made the motion to approve the minutes? Oh, you said
Yes.
so moved. Sorry, it was blubbered in my head. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Christian, for seconding.
Yep.
And all in favor?
Let me conduct the vote real quick. Chair Willis,
Aye.
Vice Chair Pease,
Aye.
Board Member Bauer,
Aye.
Board Member Eagleston Sislovich,
Yes.
Board Member Hendrick,
Yes.
Board Member McKeenan,
Yes,
Board Member Weimer.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. And do we have any comments on things that are not on, that haven't been discussed yet today?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because part of the minutes were in concern of the subcommittee for the President Hotel paint colors that I guess Gogo, David, and myself had gone out and reviewed the colors and gave feedback. Is there any new information on that?
I believe, this is Amy, I believe that Claire sent an email because there was some feedback on that. I was bringing up the email now to see, to jog my memory. This was yesterday at 10:30 a.m. To the 3 members of the subcommittee. So,
Oh, we got an email yesterday regarding that?
yes, so it does summarize what's transpired so far, and asks a few questions. So probably, since that's a subcommittee, we don't want to have the whole board dialogue on this, especially if you haven't read it. So I think read the email and then reach out to me, and we can have a next steps.
I don't see that I got the email.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's the problem. Let me just forward it to you.
Amy, I think I could say that the subcommittee is still working on the colors as a report.
Yes,
Oh.
that's a good summary.
Okay.
Thank you for your report. So anything else before we adjourn for today?
I have a question for Amy about the hostess house. Karen Holman, former council member Holman, sent an email around to the Crescent Park Neighborhood Association saying that there is now that property was on a potential housing, a list of housing sites. And I've been out of town in the Sierras for 5 days. So I didn't know if that came before the council on Monday. Do you know
It did.
anything about it?
Yes,
What
it
happened?
was some weird feedback. It was discussed on Monday, or Ms. Holman presented to the council on Monday regarding her concern about that. So I don't have recollection of whether it was the outcome there. So I can get back to the board on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring before the board, bring this to the attention of the board. This is the, sorry, now I'm blanking on the name of the restaurant, which is closed.
Macarthur Park.
Yeah, this is a Macarthur Park building. It's a historic National Registered building right next to the train station on University Avenue. And this keeps coming up, this notion that the building, because it was moved more than 100 years ago, it should again be moved and the property developed. The last time this came up was, I think, in 2012, when Stanford University and John Arriaga, a big supporter of Stanford, proposed to build housing, a lot of housing, and a performing arts center there that didn't go anywhere. It would also require the complete renovation or demolition of the overpass, which potentially is an historic structure in itself, because it appears to be the first overpass, according to Dennis Backlund, who is a former planner. Anyway, sorry to be long-winded about this, but I'm just hoping this goes away, because that's an inappropriate consideration for a historic register building. And it would lose its historic register status by moving it.
So just to follow up on that, would it be appropriate for the board to send a letter to council sort of stating our interest in that and clarifying that we feel like its National Register status would be affected by its location and surroundings?
The board can do whatever it wishes to do. I am happy though to follow up on that and see what the outcome was on Monday and start there and talk with our housing element team and, try to understand better what the next step is as far as that goes.
That sounds like a great step one. And I'm thinking step two might be to invite council to tour the building and talk about its history and sort of put it back in their heads. I think when it was Macarthur Park and we all went there with some frequency, at least everybody I knew, that it was a more prominent, obvious landmark for us. And the fact that it's now in disuse, I think, is not hurting and not helping its survival rates. So I think that there is some benefit in sort of reacquainting council with the building.
I wanted to also interject. When I went to a preservation conference at Stanford back in May, and while I was there, I connected with Laura Jones. And I don't know if any of the board members recall Laura Jones. She's the archaeologist for Stanford, and she did a really interesting presentation to the HRB regarding the Stanford Business Park a few years ago. It was one of our most, I thought, informative and interesting meetings. And anyway, so I was just casually talking to her and the subject of Macarthur Park had come up. And she was interested in doing a presentation to us to discuss the proposed high density housing in that area and the potential impacts. And I know she's Stanford, and I know that she's it might not be the right entity, but I found her information to be quite, educated, and it's land adjacent to Palo Alto. And she suggested, she was willing to come talk to us. And I even sent out an email to Amy and Caroline about this back in May, about having even a joint study session with the ARB regarding it. I don't know the content of what her message is. I don't know if the content of what she has to say is in alignment with our thoughts at all. But I just wanted to bring that up since we were discussing that they have done extensive research, and I know that Laura has some very specific and educated thoughts on the whole project. I don't know if we'd be interested in having her share that with us or not, but that's available if we are.
Just as a point of information, the property that the hostess house sits on is owned by Stanford, but it is in the city of Palo Alto's jurisdiction, as is the most of the shopping center. I don't know exactly where the city limits are. So that's why this is a Palo Alto issue and a Stanford issue. And I think Stanford has a long-term, when they came before the board in 2012, they said they were interested in expanding housing, which is a tough thing to do because Stanford has employees and student populations that are expanding, and they're looking for every way they can to find spaces to build houses.
Yeah. So, I don't know what I didn't get into what her thought was for the property, but I know that there's this discussion going on about how to best utilize the property. I don't know if her opinions would be something that we would want to, learn about. I don't know, but she did make herself available to talk to us and to the ARB.
Amy, I sent you forwarded to you this morning the email Karen Holman had sent around, which has lots of good information and links to the important historic features and the architect that designed the hostess house. I and asked you to send it to board members just so they could have it for reference.
Sure, can do that.
Thanks.
To follow up on Margaret's suggestion, I think any information is good information as long as it's truthful. So I would love to start with, a short presentation by Laura talking about the hostess house and see, I just think it's good to kind of bring it up to the forefront. And I don't think this issue is going to go away. I think we're going to have to deal with it. And I think the closer we can work with Stanford and the better off we'll be. So, Margaret, do you want to try and set up a meeting and see what her availability is for our meetings? And just try and maybe just a 15-minute presentation to the board? Maybe with your microphone on?
Sorry. I just forwarded you the email that I sent to you guys earlier, but yes, I would be happy to approach her and ask her, follow up on that and ask her if she'd be interested in doing that. I'm sure she would be thrilled to.
Sounds great. That sort of brought something back to my head. Not on the agenda, but something I think we should consider going forward. Julia Morgan, there's a Julia Morgan category 2, I think, on Chaucer Street, and the property immediately across the street is being demolished and rebuilt. I think it's in a design review stage now. But my impression is that although, okay, for starters, it mentions the house across the street without mentioning this as category 2 or Julia Morgan. And I would like to sort of raise awareness of staff. I'm not sure how, that I think those things are important to note when there's a lot of feedback being given to the architect or the designers of the property. Not the Julia Morgan, but the other property. And my feeling is that also there was a lot of consideration going to the 2 immediately adjacent properties, whereas I feel like, especially this particular Julia Morgan has balconies in the front. It's very street friendly, I guess, is what I am saying. I think that in this particular case, it would be that it's an oversight not to consider how it affects the Julia Morgan. And I'm not really sure how we approach the city's process as far as altering that. But I think at some point we should maybe look at all city processes that would potentially affect historic properties, especially 1s and 2s, and see how we can interact with the existing guidelines maybe, and sort of get a better result for our historic properties, and therefore maybe help to ensure their longevity. Anybody else have any thoughts on that one?
Well, I know that we do that when it's a commercial building. I know that we do that in certain districts. For instance, the parking garage that was going to be built across from the Clerk post office on Hamilton. We were looking at the proposed parking structure and what the impacts would be to the historic building, but we've never done that for residential projects.
I guess just basically thumbs up, thumbs down. Do we feel like it matters? I mean, am I the only one that feels like it matters, or is it something that the board thinks we should pursue?
I think, I mean, if it's a 2-story house, it's going to go through the IR process. And so maybe we could ask, the IR review to take that under consideration. But I think if we created a whole new requirement for homeowners to another, hoop to jump through, I don't know. I think that would be an arduous task.
I'm with you.
I mean, I think it's a great idea in theory, great idea, but the practicality of it, I think we need to focus our energy on like the inventory and things that that we're currently working on. I don't know. I think that's a tough one. That's what I'm saying.
I guess I wasn't thinking about adding a whole new process, but because the process already takes into consideration the immediately adjacent houses, it seems to me the facing house could easily be slotted into that group.
Well, hopefully if they are going through the IR, I think that the houses within 300 feet are noticed. And so if the homeowner of the historic Julia Morgan house has a problem with what's going on across the street, then it's their task to speak up about it and offer their comments on the impact that it will have to their house. I think that would be a way that could be handled, but it would be obviously the burden of the historic property homeowner to do that. I think they are noticed. I think anytime a new house goes up, if it's a 2-story, if it's a single story, it's a different review process. But if it's a 2-story and if they go through the individual review, then all houses within, I think it's like 300 feet are definitely noticed, including the houses across the street. So the owners of the historic house will be noticed that there is a new house that's going up across the street.
I just want to correct the dimension. It's 150 feet is our radius of notice. So yes, that would capture notice to the across the street property. And they across the street property could request a hearing as well.
Okay. Yeah, it's not the way it read to me, but I will go back and read. I guess, so I'll take that one off the table. But as far as building descriptions, when the review process is done, do we support having the historic status, especially if it's a 1 or 2 or well, I guess the historic district probably would be in there, but although I wonder if it would, if it was across the street, I don't know. But I guess, does the board feel like it would be appropriate to identify that house as a historic property that the city values as a category 2 and that it was done by a preeminent architect?
Sorry, doesn't that require that the owner agree to that designation in order to have that happen?
Well, the city has already identified this house, the house across the street, as a category 2, and I don't think there's any question that it's done by a preeminent architect. So I am just saying that as far as giving guidance to the designer about, as you review this, perhaps the design for a house, in my head, it would be appropriate to point out that this particular house has some additional value in addition to being just beautiful, that it is also tells a story and has a history. And this is just, putting some guidelines in place that when you did a review of a proposed house, that if there was a historic house immediately adjacent or across the street, that you identify its historic status, basically. Okay, gonna let this one go. So anything else from the board?
I have one correction. I think I may have said that Macarthur Park was closed, and I was just told by text that that's not the case. Their website says they're still open. So I don't want to hurt their business. In fact, it would encourage people to continue to support that because that protects the hostess house.
Thank you, David. And I will make sure I go in the near future. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 And I assume that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Bye.